Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hello, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Kaitlyn.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Josh. And today, it is my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy
birthday.
Happy birthday!
But
what's
instead,
what's your favorite drink?
what are we talking about? I don't.
Obviously non-alcoholic.
I don't drink alcohol. No.
No,
But
me neither.
otherwise,
But
instead of me looking for gifts, I decided that I wanted to give somebody something. So
look at this guy.
I know that
Perfect.
you brought somebody.
I did. I brought my daughter Laila.
So I
She's
decided
over there.
I was going to give her this.
Laila, Josh brought something for you. Wow! Come and get it. You can come and play with it over here.
Look what we got you.
What colors do you have there, Josh?
I have purple, blue, yellow, and red.
Wow.
Wow.
I'll
Laila
open it up for you
loves
too.
Play-Doh. That was so thoughtful. What do you say to Josh? And happy birthday?
Happy birthday.
Say happy birthday to him.
Oh, this looks like these were.
Gift on his birthday. Oh. Thank you, Josh.
Are we going over today, Dan?
The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka.
Franz Kafka.
Okay, sorry.
And ready. What's our first question, Dan?
What do you believe made Gregor turn into a giant insect or vermin?
I'm gonna take roll with it this time. That was a bad pun. Anyway, I think first of all, I was taught that this was a very psychological work. It's more psychology than it is literature, and personally, I think he just turned into a bug because he's always on the run. He's always on, gotta do this, gotta do that, and this is some way of, he just turns into a bug. I don't know.
I think it's more so of you have to remember Franz Kafka was an absurdist fiction writer, and I feel that he became a bug because that's the way he saw himself, and that if you take into account the way that his sister transitions into a beautiful woman,
That smells so good.
the way that he sees himself psychologically is as this miserable vermin, and that's what causes him to turn into what we would see as what we would see as being miserable. He actually gives this a picture and makes him giant.
You could, it's all visual as well. You could visualize it as you're reading it.
I would say that, to me, when I was reading it, I don't know if it's himself. I didn't get that from it. But what I did get was that whoever this character, Gregor, kind of undergoes some kind of transformation that symbolizes the fact that he's no longer human in a way, and also that he's no longer useful to his family. Like, I could relate it to a severe illness, or even a terminal illness, or some kind of disfigurement, or something like that, where you go from, where he goes, the character goes from being the sole breadwinner for the family to a burden.
Right. Exactly.
You also have to take into account that he was actually declining. He was a salesman, and he was a successful one at one point, but right around the time that he was making his transition into giant vermin, they were saying how he was lacking, declining.
His work wasn't up to par.
Yeah.
The manager was getting angry.
I thought that his transformation was similar to what you said about it being representative of a terminal illness or something of sorts in that way. I personally thought that maybe he was depressed in his everyday life, going to work every day, not being appreciated by the people he was providing for. So then in turn, he turned into this, disgusting thing, and he was still unappreciated. They that he turned into a bug and how it affected him. They only cared about how it affected them.
Yeah, pretty much. The fact that they really did not have much of, all they were concerned about is
Money.
him being a burden to them.
Right.
As you were saying, that how are we gonna, and then as it progressed, how are we gonna get rid of this? And just coming to terms with the fact that he was never gonna be relevant, that the best thing to do is just dispose of him. What is our next question?
Why are the relatives only known by their roles, such as father, mother, sister, but not known by their names?
When they're referred to by these titles when Gregor is alive. They eventually pick up names after when he dies, and during the last segment of the story, they pick up it's Greta or Gretty,
Yes. Or great.
her Samsa and Fra Samsa. But aside from that, it probably comes down to their relevance in his life at that time, and that they really don't. It may be reflective of their meaning in the story.
I absolutely agree, Josh. I think that when someone is given a name, there's more of a personal connection to that person. And if someone is just referred to as friend, mother, sister, there's a less personal relationship.
It is personal.
There.
Yeah.
And I think you had mentioned earlier about the fact that you mentioned something along the lines of it reflecting the author.
You're welcome.
No, you didn't.
Oh, I did, because I think it really does. I think that this is completely reflective of Franz Kafka's very own life. I know there's a question in the future that really, it's going to really dive into that idea, but I think that this, I don't know if he was looking for any kind of pity, because this is not the only work of his that explored this particular issue. I think if you're trying to get to know the literature of Franz Kafka, he wrote in 3 basic stages of works that he approved himself. There was the stage where his father-fearing stage, where he could never satisfy his father. His father thought that he did not live up to his father's standards.
No matter what he did,
No.
he could have won an army.
Same thing can
Won a
be
war,
said about
so.
The Judgment, which is
Okay.
that's his first work that he actually completed in one day, or overnight.
Wow.
There was the Franz Kafka seeking salvation because he was practicing Jewish person, and he wanted to go to Israel, but that leads to the 3rd stage, where he wrote a lot about his tuberculosis that eventually killed him.
What was
Great writer.
tuberculosis?
Yeah, he died from tuberculosis.
Which phase was this story? You know?
This was the first. This is the stage, his father-fearing stage.
Okay.
It's
Which-
understandable
You would
because
think
the
it was
father.
the tuberculosis stage?
I would have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
There are creepy predictions that he makes about the future that actually come true. This was written in 1915, and he died in 1924.
And that's when TV was
But
really.
you can see that clearly in Hunger Artist and the Burroughs. He actually refers to the nickname that he gave his TV straight out. That was the Beast. And then Josephine, the Mouse Folk Singer, is the Salvation stage. But then again, a Hunger Artist also has his Salvation stage too.
To get back to the original question,
Yes.
I had not noticed in reading, as you said, that it was after Gregor dies that the character, or that the other characters take on names.
Yeah, then they seem to develop meaning. I don't know if it's they feel they picked up meaning, or
Well, I think this story undergoes a change in perspective. I think that while Gregor is alive, the story is pretty much told through his eyes.
Mhm.
We never see anything that he does not see.
Right.
And then when he dies, obviously, it becomes more of a, I forget the literary term for it, but it's more objective,
Mhm.
where it's just looking at
Yes,
things
that
for
is,
what they are.
yeah, that's exactly true. The fact that when he's alive, it is his perspective, and we're supposed to feel for him, which I think that Kafka does a perfect job doing.
So maybe it's a statement about him then. I'm
Yes.
kind of struck, especially with the ending of the story, of how his family, once they let go of Gregor, they seem, and when they're in the process of letting go of him, they seem to find their own purpose in life. They all go out and get jobs. They all, begin meaning, or find meaning in that way as well.
They're
And then
able
at
to-
the end, they even mentioned that they didn't like the house that they were living in, and the only reason they lived there was because Gregor was
Ah, yeah, that's what it. I get that kind of feeling. They were able to downsize. That was what they did.
Right.
They were in.
And they wanted to
yeah.
get to a more central location too.
So everybody was just better off without him, with him being there.
And
They're
that's
better off.
Kafka's pretty much
Seems
that
that
saying that it's the wonderful life idea that the world's going to be better without me, which in his case it's the opposite of George Bailey, because without George Bailey the world things seem to be worse without him. So it's a satire. Next question.
How would you classify this novel?
I can't help it, it's a child in me, okay?
It's absurdist, but it's definitely semi-autobiographical, because I think that just about any work of Franz Kafka's can be traced to his own life. This one, he has his father, who was always hard on him, didn't think that he was the person that he wanted him to be. His mother was very meek to the father's wishes. Franz Kafka actually had 3 younger sisters. The one he had the greatest connection to was his youngest, Atla. And I think that while this sister is a combination of the 3, she most reflects the youngest, because Kafka himself looked after the youngest one the most.
I'm going to say, you're wrong, but I'm going to say more of a fantasy, because obviously in real life, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow. Well, knowing myself, that may happen, but no, all joking aside, that doesn't happen in the real world. You don't wake up the next morning and look in the mirror and say, oh, I have antennae. And you know, that doesn't happen, so it's more of a fantasy to me.
I agree with Josh and you too, Charlie, that
Thank you.
it's definitely absurdist and
How absurd.
semi-autobiographical in that he, in his real life, could never please his father, and in the story, Gregor couldn't do anything right, whether he was alive or doing everything by working and providing for them. They weren't happy, and when he was unable to work, they weren't happy. So his life was useless to his family.
Especially the father. His
Right.
father was very, just a very rough person to begin with. But even when he was knocking on the door, the one thing he noticed was the anger that came with his knocking. He had been soft.
And it was never like, are you okay? They never were concerned for him. Like I said earlier, they were just concerned for how it affected them.
He was what they call a cash cow, basically. He did all the work. Breadwinner, cash cow. I'm a cow in general, but still.
Want to say something, Ryan?
But I don't know. Like with the original point that I was making with the previous question about the names and how when we're looking at it through Gregor's perspective, they don't have names. They're only assigned by their roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe that lack of caring went both ways before he even changed that. He seems like he could have been a bit overbearing himself.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's autobiographical or not. I don't really know anything about Kafka's life. I would definitely agree that it is clearly an absurdist story. Because, you know, like Charlie said, this kind of stuff don't happen. It's not realistic at all.
It's definitely also psychological.
Yes.
Kafka has been classified as a horror writer as well,
I wanted to say horror as well,
but
because I would be in horror if I woke up the next morning and I saw that in the mirror.
at the same time, it was also very original to the point that it was a. I don't think you could say magic realism because it's there's a magical element to it, but he wasn't.
A lot of magic.
Most people aren't going to. Nobody's going to wake up with a giant dog.
You might wake up pregnant.
Yeah, I don't think there was quite enough realism for it to be magical realism. I think that those kind of stories would need to be based more in a reality setting.
I think the more realistic approach about was the story I mentioned about his father fearing in judgment, because he talked about how he could not satisfy his own father. His father became someone who was no longer able, and then he just constantly bashed the subject in the story for not living up to his wishes, and then damned him. And
Is it possible that the story might be about his father?
the Metamorphosis?
Yes.
I think a lot of it has to do with his father. I think a lot of it was inspired by his father. I think the difference was in the Metamorphosis, there's a bit more. The judgment's directly about his father. The Metamorphosis is not. It's more so about Gregor. And
Well, that's what I think. Could Gregor be his father, but not Franz? Is that?
I think Gregor Samsa is Franz Kafka. Somebody even pointed out the last names sound almost, they're 5 letters and they both end in A.
Well, yeah, but Herman Kafka had the same last name as well.
He did have the same last name, but the father was just the father. He was Herr Samson, even though Herr is just a term for Mr.
Yes.
in German. But
Really?
yeah,
Her?
Herr, Herr, and Frau, Frau, is Mrs.
What would Mr. be? I'm just curious.
Her.
Hair. Is it hair?
Herr, yeah, maybe. I'm not very. I know we have some of our viewers, our German viewers,
Wiener Schnitzel. Am I saying it right? Wiener Schnitzel?
Anybody have any final thoughts?
This is really cool.
I would say that one thing that I noticed that we haven't really talked about was, I thought it was interesting that it seemed like when Gregor makes kind of, tries to show that he's trying to grasp onto his humanity, even though he's clearly no longer human, is at those moments that the highest conflict in the household happen. Like in the first place when he tries to go to work in the beginning, that's the first major, where they have to get him back in his room, and then later when they're taking the furniture away.
Right. And then the part where his father chucks the apple out.
Right, yeah, which immediately follows.
And then it finally gets to the point where the other people living in the complex decide to move out because the living conditions are bad.
Well, what you mentioned is that he's trying to grasp onto his humanity at all of these points of major conflict, like the major one that you said, when he's trying to listen to his sister playing the violin.
This is why I didn't do
Something
baseball.
that humans
Very
would do,
long.
and then everybody then wants to leave.
Yes. And when it's his mother that says, should we take this furniture away? When they're taking the furniture out, they ask, the mother asks, should we do this? Because he's holding on to this as this might be the only thing that can keep him human, or give him any chance of returning to what he once was. And then he comes flying out from under the couch and jumps onto it to try to convey to his sister not to touch it. And that's what starts the entire episode that ends with his mother passing out, his father throwing apples into his back.
Every attempt that he makes, there's just steps back
Yeah.
and leading to his ultimate demise.
It only makes sense when what you see is a giant insect. They only really, his sister's able to realize who he was, and she was able to convey that. But
I have a question that I want to add to the
absolutely.
discussion. If Gregor had not, went off and died on his own, do we think that his family would have been the ones to kill him, or would he have just continued living?
Ultimately, I think at least they would have abandoned him. But if they did not want to move, I think that there was probably going to be a way they would have offed him.
I think, I like where you're going with this. First, I read, this was in the very tail end of the novel, where the father makes the sign of the cross at the end, and I think everyone copies that as well. So I'm thinking they're more religious, but now the only way they would kill him off is if he was a complete danger. If Gregor was about to go out and, attack somebody for real, or like go out and really, hurt somebody, then I think they would do that. But to abandon him, well,
I don't think they were cruel to the point to actually kill him, but I
No.
don't think that they would have abandoned him and just
No.
looked the other way.
because it would go against their religion. You do this 1 minute, and the next minute, okay, ready.
Yeah, and also another thing that I think points toward yours and Charlie's, Josh's sentiment on that is the way that they treat the housekeeper at the end, when they are basically decide to fire her because the way that she kind of wants to be callous about Gregor and tell her how she disposed of the body and all that. And they take that opportunity to say, well, she's not working for us anymore. Almost like they're kind of protective, even though he was such a drain on them. It's like, they view her as an outsider, and it was like, he may have been a burden, but he was our burden, kind of.
Right, good point.
She was just a worker for that. She was face value cost,
Yeah.
because they had to. She wasn't doing that for free. But
But they still were protective over him, despite the burden that he was.
they needed a scapegoat. Also, something I wanted to bring up was the image of the insect, because it's been historically spoken about what did Samsa look like as the insect. I know that Kafka himself did not want an image of Samsa as the giant insect or giant vermin, and there was a graphic novel that came out for Metamorphosis that portrayed him as a beetle-looking creature.
Wait, John Paul George or Ringo?
Yeah.
I met Ringo, actually.
The bug, the beetle. But
I know.
I could see that he was a giant beetle and a cumbersome one, but the way that they portrayed him in the graphic novel, he just looked like any old bug. It really.
I think they really made a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak, out of describing him. But I guess that was just for descriptive purposes.
How would you have seen? What did you think he would fall?
Okay, I just imagined a giant bug laying on a twin-sized bed on its back, with the shell on the bed, and tons of little legs all along the body. I imagined it black and just really gross, like the grossest bug I could imagine.
Oh, so like a giant beetle.
Yes, exactly.
Stop knocking the Beatles,
Larry?
Yeah, I would say that it would be kind of beetle-like. Yeah, it's hard to say.
And Charles?
I would say grotesque, very grotesque. I mean, everything with what you said, giant beetle laying on the bed. I also would say very unkempt, of course. I think you covered that. Because, yeah, you basically stole my thunder.
Already.
It seems like, I was going to say, it seems like Kafka it goes out of his way not to go into too much detail, so almost that it can't be.
I think
Just
that's
enough to have
what,
some sort of idea, but not overboard.
I
Yeah,
think in a
that
way
way,
it makes
you
it
know.
more relatable too.
Like, how many legs did he have? He never says.
Right.
It's the-
Many moving, like,
He just
Right.
gives vague descriptions, the shell, just legs in general.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in checking out some books by Franz Kafka, we've got 2 of them. I'm going to sort them out by detail. There's this one I got at the college bookstore. It was not too costly. It's the Barnes & Noble Classics edition. It has some of his more notable works. The complete stories includes every short story that was a part of Kafka's library. It did mention, however, that he only approved of some of his works to remain in standing. Franz Kafka once mentioned, I'm quoting from the foreword written by John Updike, "Of all my writings, the only books that can stand are these: The Judgment, The Stoker," which is the first chapter of a novel of his called America, "Metamorphosis, Penal Colony, Country Doctor, and the short story Hunger Artist. When I say that those 5 books and the short story can stand, I do not mean that I wish them to be reprinted and handed down to posterity. On the contrary, should they disappear altogether, that would please me best. Only, since they do exist, I do not wish to hinder anyone who may want to or keep."
very touching.
His novels, The Trial and the he had unfinished novels. He wanted them all burned. So technically, The Trial, The Castle, and America were only partially his. His agent Max Brode ended up finishing them up and then having them published. And he told them that he wasn't going to listen.
Weren't there a lot of authors that, mind you, I'm having a little allergy problem, so I'm not contagious, don't worry. But what didn't a lot of authors burn their work?
There were probably plenty of them that wanted their works
There were
burned.
musicians
A lot of
as
them.
well.
A lot of
They
them.
did the
They
same.
burned their. A lot of them. Their works ended up getting burned. I know that with Kafka, a lot of his relatives. I think his parents died before the Second World War, but his sisters died during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
One of them was his youngest sister was. They were going to rescue her, but she did not want to be rescued because of her race, or because of racial connections. So she decided to deny being spared, and she killed herself. His wife, no, his I shouldn't say that because he only made it as far as engagement, but his last significant lived in the 50s, but the rabbi did not approve of their marriage because it was too big.
She wants another cookie?
Yeah, she's out.
I can understand that. I work with kids, so. I can
Already.
understand.
Definitely check these 2 books out. I'll leave links to where you can find them under. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks again, John.
Already my pleasure. For now, keep reading.